Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hi, welcome to All About Kids. Today's guest, local author Juanita Havill, will be talking with Hennepin County Library staff member Phyllis Pope. Later on in the program, we'll be visiting a creative writing class at Christ the King School in Minneapolis.
Hello, I'm talking to Juanita Havill today. Juanita has written 2 children's books that have just been published. She's not a Minnesota native, but she was born in southern Indiana. After she graduated from college, she worked in France for 5 years as a translator. She was married in France and decided that she and her husband wanted to raise their family in the United States, and so they ended up in Minnesota, where she lives now, in the Jonathan area of Chaska. Juanita's first book was published 2 years ago. It was called Jamaica's Find. And just recently, her second book, Leroy and the Clock, has been published. I wonder, Juanita, if you could tell us a little bit about what it was like to become a writer, if you've always wanted to be a writer, or how you started doing this.
Well, I think I have. I remember when I was about 4 or 5, I wrote my first poem, and when I just learned to write. And I had always wanted to tell stories and write poetry, but I never got down to actually sending anything out seriously until well after college. Even though I did study English in college and French, I never made that leap into testing out, whether I could be a writer or not. And it's something that I've always wanted to do.
Where do you get your ideas for writing children's books?
That's a question that I'm always asked whenever I go to schools. I visit a lot of schools and enjoy talking to students and teachers as well. And that's got to be, it's always in there, where the ideas come from. So you'd think I'd have a good answer by now. I should be prepared. I think that the ideas come from many places. They come from dreams, for one thing. I think one of the first ideas for a story I had was a dream I had. It must have been 15 or 20 years ago, and it just reverberated in my mind for the longest time, called The Glass Bed. And eventually it became a fairy tale, which I think it was in Magic Window, a children's magazine, last year. Other ideas come from things that happen to me, people that I see, from arguments, from nowhere. Sometimes they're just gifts, and they happen, and I write them down, and I find that I have a story that I'm not sure where it came from. Those are probably the most wonderful, the ones that I don't know where they come from.
What about Jamaica's Find? Did you have an experience that got you started on that, or was that one of those gifts?
Oh, there were lots of things involved in the story. I didn't realize it until after I wrote the story and began to think about it, because well, one thing that happens to me a lot, I'm always finding things. I think maybe it's because I'm nearsighted and I'm always looking right down in front of me whenever I walk, and I find lots of things. Minnesota is a wonderful place to look for things, because when the snow melts in the spring, there's all sorts of things in the road, watches and toys and hats and everything. And so I find a lot of things, and during the course of years, and finding all these different items, I wonder who they belong to. And that definitely was somewhere in my mind when I wrote the story, Jamaica's Find. Something else that was in my mind was a character. I used to go to Armitage Park when I lived in Minneapolis with my children, who were about 3 and 5 then, and I noticed that there's stories in parks too, and I like to watch the kids. And one of them in particular was just very animated and lively, and a character that I sort of took a mental picture of. I wanted to put her in a story, and this became Jamaica. I never knew her, and I never met her, but she definitely was a character I wanted to put in my story. And something else that I realized after I wrote the story, When I lived in Paris, I had a friend who was a German, and she lost a purse on a bridge in Paris. And I don't know if you've ever lost a purse in a big city, but you don't think you're ever going to find it again, right?
Yeah.
So she actually got a call from the police department of the quarter that she lost it in, and someone had returned the purse. She went to the department to claim it, and they'd left their name and address. And so she called, and after that they became friends.
Oh.
So this story was, I knew the story, she'd told it to me, and 10 years later it appears in a very different form in Jamaica's Find. And also, I think what really started the story was an argument I had with my daughter about returning a lost item. And we had one of those dreadful arguments that parents have with kids. And I felt somehow this is not solving this problem at all, and I'm not communicating what I want to communicate, and everyone feels bad. And that set me off writing. So I worked on the story for quite a while.
Well, I think that's one of the really appealing things about this story is that so many of us who have had children deal with the question of how to handle it when they bring home something that doesn't belong to them, the finders keepers idea. And it's interesting the way it's presented in the story and handled. And I think that shows that a children's book, even though it's very short, 32 pages long, and most of it pictures, does have to have a plot. And the way of creating a plot in a short book has to be a real challenge for you.
Oh, indeed, it is. It takes a long time, for me anyway, to get it right. It can come out. It's the rewriting that I have to work on that simple storyline, you know, that isn't cluttered up with too much. You're writing for young readers, and I can't make it too complex. It has to be simplified, but it has to be strong, and it has to be appealing.
Yeah, something definitely has to happen.
I think so. I think there's many forms of storybooks and picture storybooks, but in one with a plot, I think you definitely have to have something that has a lot of feeling going on, and a character that the children will identify with.
Yes, Well, to be a writer of children's books at first glance sounds like it would be a very simple project to toss off a 32-page picture book, but I know that it can't be that easy, and I just wonder how you manage to do it, how you spend your time, how you regulate yourself so that you have the discipline to work each day, if you do that.
Yes, I try to anyway. I get pretty hard to live with if I don't get my time in. I try to. I have an office in my home in the basement, and I go down and try to work 3, 4, 5 hours steady, and then naturally there's some interruptions, but now that my children are in school, I find that I can keep pretty regular hours. You were saying that you thought many people think it's very easy, you know, to write a short story like that, and I would advise them to try to see that it isn't quite as easy as it looks. And I remember one woman asking me when I was giving a talk, actually she said, I bet you could just whip that out in 30 minutes or so, that story. And actually you might be able to sit down and copy one in less than 30 minutes. Some of them only have 200 words, 1,500 words in some stories. But no, I find that I have to rewrite them over and over again to get the story right. And even though I work every day, I may not be terribly productive in that work. I may not come up with a story that's going to be sent off and become a book. I don't know. I just find that I have to keep trying. I have to keep writing every day.
And I imagine that part of the time is not spent just writing, but answering letters and sending out letters and dealing with the mechanics of it all.
Oh yes, I think there's the marketing side of it is something that a writer has to be prepared to get involved in. If you hope, you know, mine isn't a story where someone discovered me and said, write this story. And Jamaica's Find was pulled out of an unsolicited pile of manuscripts at Houghton Mifflin and became a book. But it was not the first publisher that I sent the story to, and I have many other manuscripts circulating as well. And I think you do have to try. You have to keep trying and not be discouraged. There are people who, after 1 or 2 rejections, have said, "Oh, it's not for me. I can't handle this. I don't think I want to be a writer." And there are others who say, "What? It's only been rejected 15 times? Keep going. That's nothing."
I think Judy Dalton has 35 times for her first book.
Is that right?
Yes. The 36th made it.
Well,
but
yeah.
that sounds like a lot of really hard work and dedication to be able to do that.
A lot of postage and is involved.
So how many things do you have out circulating right now?
I haven't counted recently, but I think there may be about between 15 and 20 projects. And I do some writing for magazines, for children's magazines as well. And these have to be circulated to different editors too. Do you find that it's easier to get your things published now that you've had the success with Jamaica's Find and a second book? Since the same publisher is doing the second book, I'm sure I had a very serious reading, and I don't know if it makes a difference. I think publishers often know what they are looking for, and your book has to fit in with their list, what they are in the market for. I think that if you say that you've already had a book published, it is certainly going to get a more serious reading and get out of that slush pile and onto an editor's desk more quickly. And it may get rejected more quickly too, because it's gone through the process faster. Yeah,
Would you, if you were sending something out to a magazine, would you mention that you had had 2 books published?
To a magazine?
Would that help? Or
Yes, I think it probably would, especially a newer magazine who isn't familiar with your work. Often magazines want samples of your work anyway, so definitely it would help, I think.
Okay. Jamaica's Find had 2 special things happen to it. It was chosen by Reading Rainbow, the television program, and also won the 1987 Ezra Jack Keats New Writer Award. What did those 2 things do for you?
Well, they put me on a high.
I bet.
Yeah, it was nice. I was really thrilled to win this Ezra Jack Keats Award. I think it's a fairly new award. And I went out to New York to the public library there where the award was given. It was in sort of a memoriam for Ezra Jack Keats, and the day was Ezra Jack Keats Day, so there was a lot of festivities at the library centered around Keats and his books, and there were several talks given at the award ceremony, and it was very moving. It was wonderful.
Did you get a plaque, and did you stand up and give a little talk?
Yes, I did. It was actually a medal with Ezra Jack Keats on it, and then there was an award as well, a cash award. So it was a very wonderful, prestigious prize, I felt.
Yes, that's great.
And the Reading Rainbow, of course, I watched every one. I didn't know when it was going to be on because I didn't have a schedule, so I watched every Reading Rainbow, which I often watch anyway, and it was on last summer as a review, and that again was a very nice experience to have.
I would think having that seal on it would certainly help sell books.
Well, yes, it's in paperback. I imagine that helps.
Yes.
And, I think that people say that the children that see the books on television definitely want to go to the library and check out the Reading Rainbow books.
Yes, that's true.
And buy the books at the bookstore.
Well, speaking of selling and buying and cash,
Here we go.
I'm interested in finding out not how much money you make, but are you making money, and is writing children's books something that can be done for a living by people?
I think it is done by living, for a living by some people. I wouldn't quit a job I had if this were my sole support, if I had published 1 book. No, you're paid in advance and royalties on a picture book, but don't get these confused with these enormous advances and auctions that you have on bestseller
It's not
authors.
Stephen King, is it?
No, no, it isn't at all. No, and I don't know whether I personally could, think that I could make a living as a picture book writer. You have to go for some other rewards.
And the other part of it is that when you don't do the illustration yourself, you're sharing the...
the royalties are split on a picture book, often 50-50, and sometimes even the the artist will get a higher royalty. It depends on what the editor thinks, what the input is on the story. But yes, you do split royalties. It's sort of, even though some people think that you work with the illustrator, and in my experience and in the experience of many picture book writers, I think you find that the illustrator is found by the editor. And you're better off submitting a text without, you know, the illustrations done by someone that you happen to know.
Well, I imagine you've got some plans, working on some new books and some new ideas. What can we expect to see from you next?
Well, there is already, I have some news. There will be another Jamaica book, Jamaica Tagalong, which is a story I worked on about the same time I was working on Jamaica's Find. And after 2 or 3 years, I finally got it in the shape that I needed it in. I, for some reason, needed to wait on that one. It wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. So I suppose that look for that in 2 years, maybe. It takes between 18 months, 2 years, and longer to produce a picture book. And this is after I have done my writing of the text and submitted it to the publisher. So there will be another Jamaica book. And I have also been working on a middle grade novel, which looks like it will be published again in 18 months or 2 years by Crown. And this is a story about an 8-year-old, Leona, who is in the middle of a family of 3 children and finds it very hard to get attention from her parents because she has a very cute younger brother and a talented older sister.
It sounds like a universal idea, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know with families being smaller now, with 2 children families, but I think that getting attention from parents is pretty universal. Other ideas, other things I work on are folk tales, which I find hard to place, but I've been working on some Icelandic folk tales that I hope someday to have published. I find it was very hard to find a simple Icelandic story that wasn't too violent and that could be told to children. I was surprised when I started researching. And this is, by the way, a wonderful place to research Scandinavian legends.
I bet that is. It is. Yes.
And myths. I found wonderful resources at the university.
Great. Well, this is exciting news to hear about what's coming up from you, and we wish you lots of luck, and we'll be looking for your books in the libraries and the bookstores.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks.
Juanita Havill is interested in encouraging young people to write. She recently spent time with a creative writing class at Christ the King School in South Minneapolis.
Jamaica was almost as happy as Kristen, who took Edgar Dog in her arms and gave him a big welcome back hug. Did you recognize some of those stories in the story? Did you see? I forgot to mention too that at this park I went to, I saw Jamaica. That's why I found Jamaica. There was a girl there at the park that I sort of took a mental picture of and decided I wanted to put her in one of my stories. And I don't know her name. I never met her. I have no idea what her name is, but she was kind of in my mind when I wrote the story Jamaica's Find. I had her be Jamaica. And I did not, of course, illustrate the book. Anne Sibley O'Brien drew the painted the pictures for it. And I thought it was a coincidence that she looked a lot like the girl that I had seen at the park. More of a coincidence because Anne O'Brien lives off the coast of Maine on an island. And I was here in Minneapolis. My Jamaica was here, and her Jamaica was there. She had a model, a girl that she used as a model to paint the picture for. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how the story that was in my mind that I put on paper became a book. Actually, I usually write my stories. I don't know how you work. You probably write yours. See, just like this, on the yellow paper there. This girl has the yellow paper. I write my stories on long yellow paper with a pen. Instead of typing them, I just feel more comfortable writing them. So Jamaica's Find, the first title I gave it was Lost and Found, but I decided I didn't like that title. But that's the first title I gave it. I call it Lost and Found, and I wrote it just like you write your stories on a piece of paper with a pen. And unfortunately, I don't have that copy because we moved and I lost it. But I did type it up, and I got that copy with me to show you what a picture book text looks like. This is just what I sent in to the publisher. Did you, when you were working on your stories, I think some of you, I saw yours were typed too. This is a picture book text, or storybook text, right here. It doesn't look very long, does it? 5 pages, double-spaced type. It's story? Well, I typed this up, and this is what I sent. Now, how to know where to send a story is sometimes interesting. The way I decided was simply by reading lots of books. I like to read. And I found that the books that I really liked, I would see who published those books, and if they were like some of the stories that I was writing. And that's how I decided where to send to make us find. And the first publisher I sent it to did not accept it, nor did the second or third or fourth. But the fifth said, we like this story, but we don't have a place for it right now. Send it in 18 months if you want to. And that was very encouraging to me. I thought, well, someone likes this story, so I kept sending it. And the sixth publisher I sent it to decided they wanted to do it. And that publisher was Houghton Mifflin. So after you think the job is done after the publisher gets the story. Well, it's sort of just beginning. But my editor looked at the story here, and worked with that story, and sent me back a copy that I got to work on that looks something like this. Did you ever see something like that? Your teachers ever write on your pages? Well, my editor had some suggestions to make. And one of the problems with the story, you didn't hear the first story, you just heard the book form. One of the problems with the story was that it was too long. So I had to cut it. You know what that means when you cut a story? What do you do when you cut a story?
You don't use all your ideas.
You don't use all your ideas, that's right. Yeah. You have to cut it, it's too long. You have to take out some of the sentences and words and paragraphs and ideas, maybe. So I had to.
Some of Christ the King School's most enthusiastic readers were anxious to share their current reading favorites with us.
Hello, my name is Lisa Marty. I go to Christ the King School. I'm in 6th grade and I'm 12 years old. Do you and your friends like to tell scary stories? If you do, this is a great book for you. The title is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The author is Alvin Schwartz and the illustrator is Stephen Gamble.
Hi, my name is Amy Desmond. I go to Christ the King School. I'm 12 years old and in the 6th grade. If you think you would like Lisa's book, you're really going to enjoy my book. It is More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz and illustrated by Stephen Gamble.
So, if you and your friends are planning a sleepover and you want to hear some really spooky stories, this is a great book for you.
More Scary Stories is the perfect book to pack with your camping gear for summer camp. They'll keep the whole town wide-eyed and awake for hours past midnight. They will probably have trouble sleeping too. Another thing I like about this book is that it appeals to all ages. Some of these stories are real scary, while others are kind you could read to your little sister and she wouldn't be too scared.
One of my favorite stories is called The Babysitter. It is about a babysitter who receives hourly scary phone calls while she is babysitting 3 children. The person calling says spooky things like, "I will be there in a half hour." Eventually, he calls and he says, "I will be there in 15 minutes. Does he ever show up? If you want to know, check out Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark from your favorite Hennepin County Library.
If you're ever in the library and searching for a really scary book, check out More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Hi, my name is Gretchen Ellinger, and I read The Last Goodie by Stephen Schwant. The Last Goodie is a story about Marty, a 17-year-old boy trying to solve a 12-year mystery of how and why his babysitter, Stacy Davis, disappeared. The school Marty and Stacy attended is closing at the end of the year. Marty, like Stacy, is a winning member of the track team. Marty has a chance to win the track title of The Last Goodie. This is very meaningful to Marty, since Stacy was the first goodie. The most exciting part of this book was when Marty and his friend were camping out in front of Stacy's old house to see if the killer would come. When the killer finally showed up, he spotted Marty and his friend and started chasing after them. If you want to find out what happened, go to your nearest Hennepin County Library and check out The Last Goodie by Stephen Schwant.
Hi, my name is Molly Hallahan. I'm 13 years old and I'm in 7th grade. I really enjoyed every single book written by Cynthia Voigt. The first book I read was Homecoming. It's about 4 young children who have their mother abandon them. Dicey is the oldest and the leader. Dicey must take care of her 2 younger brothers and her younger sister. They travel across a couple states in search of their grandmother. The next book that Miss Voigt wrote was Dicey's Song. It is about Dicey and her friends, but And then another book that Cynthia Voigt wrote was A Solitary Blue. This is a book about how one of Dicey's friends, Jeff, met Dicey. It is a really exciting and realistic book. But don't think that Cynthia Voigt only writes about Dicey and her friends. Take Izzy Willy Nilly, for example. Izzy Willy Nilly is a book about Izzy, a young girl. She goes out on a date one night, and upon driving back with her boyfriend, who is drunk, they crash into a tree. The boyfriend has no major injuries, only minor. But Izzy Willy Nilly is crippled for life. This is a story about what Izzy must overcome being crippled.
Hi, my name is Tony Ellis. Are you looking forward to summer vacation? I am. 4 Miles to Pinecone by John Hatzler is about a boy named Tom who flunks his sophomore English class. His teacher decides to give him another chance. If he can write a grammatically correct story 47 pages long, he would pass the class. Tom has the whole summer to complete this assignment. Tom had difficulties deciding on a topic. While cabin sitting for his aunt and uncle in northern Minnesota, an exciting adventure begins to unfold, an adventure that would make a perfect 47-page story. My favorite part is when Tom follows 2 boat robbers. He gets caught, but then escapes behind a fallen down tree. Then he goes back to the van. Then, when the time is right, drives a long 4 miles to Pinecone. If you like wilderness adventure, this is the book for you.
Hi, my name is Kate Nunn and I'm 8 years old. This book is by C.L. Clifton. It's called The Boy Who Didn't Believe in Spring. It's about a boy who didn't know the meaning in spring, but he finally found out what it means. I like this book because it has wonderful illustrations. It's different than any other book I've read. Hi, my name is Megan Mesrick and I'm 8 years old and the book I read was Old Henry. It's by Joan W. Glass and pictures are by Stephen Gamble. Have you ever had a messy neighbor or a bossy neighbor? This story is about a messy neighbor that has bossy neighbors. And it tells us whether to have a messy neighbor or a bossy neighbor than no neighbor. I like this book a whole lot because it rhymes. And I think Stephen Gamble's pictures are good because they put a real feeling into what he draws.
Winner of the 1987 Boston Globe Horn Book Award, this is a warm, folksy novel about characters you come to know and care about. It's a book about change, growth, family, and love in the best sense of the word. Set in Appalachia with some of the corresponding grammar and dialect of that area, the book is primarily the story of 12-year-old Parabelle Ann Starkey, nicknamed Rabble, and her mother, Sweet Hosanna, a single parent. Sweet Ho is a housekeeper for the Bigelow family. Mrs. Bigelow has suffered a nervous breakdown after the birth of Gunther, who's described as the homeliest child in High River. Mr. Bigelow is a prominent real estate man, and Veronica Bigelow is the same age as Rabble, and the two quickly become best friends, almost sisters. When Mrs. Bigelow has to be hospitalized after a well-done dramatic episode, Sweet Ho and Rabble move into the main house, and Rabble feels she's found the family stability that she's always longed for. Of course, as we all know, nothing ever stays the same, and Rabble must cope with change again. Rabble Starkey is homey, it's small-towny, it's charming. Kids in grades 5 to 9 will be glad if they read it.
Rabble Starkey by Lois Lowry, reviewed by Lois Andersen, Children's Services Librarian at the Oxboro Community Library in Bloomington. Please join us again for All About Kids.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library